Hello, this is Old Buck Dave introducing a special Two Old Bucks episode, otherwise known as episode 7. This episode was actually a test using Zoom audio for remote interviews. So Dill and I were winging it from separate locations as opposed to following our usual in-person winging it program format. While I'd like to say there is no failure in science, Dell's audio in particular is decidedly subpar, so we apologize for that. On the bright side, we did manage to generate a half-hour meanderings on ghosts, aliens, bad teachers, bad students, and bad hitchhiking that we hope you will find interesting. So hang with us. Here it is, folks. Guys start coughing on you.
Okay,
Think about it.
I have thought about this, and I said to myself, all these, there's an alien adventure on the Discovery Channel or something, and they were talking about the difficulties our astronauts have coming back to Earth and being back in our gravity. So I'm thinking, all this time, we're just assuming these alien creatures who are able to float around space can somehow, quickly accommodate to our gravity and build pyramids.
Of course.
And then I said to myself, wait a minute. Captain Kirk, who I was just watching the other night, is not even floating around inside his spaceship. So, and yet we know this, I'm thinking, oh, my dream was shattered. I'm thinking, oh, Star Trek was just a movie scene. I'm telling you, that was.
So somehow we got from me asking you if you believe in ghosts to Star Trek. How do we do that?
I'm sorry. That's about
all
the
right.
second cup of coffee routine normally when we hit the prevarications there. Okay, ghosts, no, I don't believe in them per se. Why do you ask?
Well, I don't believe in them either, as I indicated, but I do have a ghost story.
Okay.
Would you be interested? Would you be interested in hearing my ghost story?
I am your constant captive audience when it comes to these
That's
stories.
Right. All right, Mr. Tablet. So this happened several years ago. We were in Germany, and I think we were in Bamberg, but I can't be sure that was really the city. Anyway, I had booked a room in advance in a place. It was a really old place, kind of up on the hill, right, just several blocks from the downtown area, but you had to climb up a hill. It had to be, many hundred years old. Had that feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so we checked in and decided that we were thirsty, so we walked a few blocks back. We found a bar. The bar we went into, we were the only non-locals in the bar, that's usually fun. We did find one woman who spoke some English. Had a nice time. Ended up toasting each other. Climbed a few blocks back up the hill.
Getting toasted?
Yeah, we were.
I'm picturing. I'm following you. Go ahead.
All right, so we go to bed. Nice heavy white wine sleep, I guess. I wake up in the middle of the night, and I sit up. I look, and in the doorway to our room is a woman standing there, and she's got these long, flowing white robes on, and she's got long white hair. And of course, I was like, whoa, I had way too much to drink last night. What's going on here? And I try to talk to her, or I try to say something, and I was just kind of frozen. And then after, it was, I was going to say minutes, but it was probably seconds. It was maybe 15 seconds, 30 seconds. She kind of fades away back into it. And it's like, okay, fall back asleep. We go to breakfast the next morning downstairs in this place. And the owner comes over, sits down with us, really nice guy. Started chatting about this and that, told him we liked his place, and asked him about the history of the place. And he said, well, it's been this, that. He says the one interesting thing, though, he says, people do talk about the lady in white. And I said, what? The lady in white? Tell me about the lady in white. So he said, well, he says, I've never seen her myself, but I've had several guests tell me that they see this woman in flowing white robes wandering the halls at night. And I just about choked at that time. My wife looked at me because I hadn't said anything to her about it. And I said, I think I saw the lady in white. So anyway, that's my ghost story. Even though I don't believe in ghosts, I'm trying to convince myself that this was not a ghost, but it was a pretty interesting little
Okay,
event that
so
happened to me.
out of the blue, he asked you if you perhaps saw this apparition. Can we call it that?
Yeah, he didn't ask me if I saw it. When I asked him about the history of the place, and he said a few things. He said, and it's almost offhandedly. He said, and of course, he said, there's the lady in white. You know, we've had many reports of people seeing this woman in long white, flowing white robes, and I just about fell off my chair.
So, are you anticipating that you might see another ghost or something? I'm not sure where you can go with this, other than the fact that, I mean, you had an experience. I'm trying to help you out here to reconcile this, because you may think you may think you're going to see another one.
I don't know where to go with it either. It's just, here's a guy who doesn't believe in ghosts, and I had an experience of some sort. I do recall him saying that she died around 1400. So that would make her older than us.
Do you realize the coincidence between your apparition and the one that the Ghostbusters saw in the library? A woman in white with long flowing robes and white hair. Do you realize
that? Thought about that.
That is the movie script description of your basic ghost?
I think you may have just solved my ghost story.
I mean,
that was perhaps.
I'm thinking you feel good. You know, you believe you saw that and so on and so forth. But I mean, why do ghosts always have to look like that? I mean, why couldn't it be a rather rotund ghost? She had a dark business suit on or something. You know what I mean? Some other description. Then you'd have had to walk up and tried to shake hands with it, and then obviously there wouldn't be nothing there. So you know what I mean? Like, you're describing the absolute dictionary version of what a ghost looks like, and you're telling me that you had a few wines before all this happened.
I had several wines. Yeah, she was like a Riesling ghost. Yeah. All right, I think perhaps you've solved me now. If any listeners out there want to tell us about their ghost stories, we'd be interested. Well, you know, the other day on one of our episodes, we talked about our favorite teacher, at least my favorite teacher. I also have a worst teacher. I know you don't believe in worst teachers; you just believe in bad students or something like that. But would you be would you be interested in hearing about everything under the sun?
Story? It's just that I said it was my perspective was. A worse teacher, you almost have to be paying attention to even judge them. And, you know, I was a sort of one of those, I was not a great student, but I certainly could sit through it.
I can vouch. Yeah.
I mean, it's just that there's teachers that would probably put you to sleep. And of course, you know, you're probably going to fail no matter what you did anyhow. So, you know what I mean? It was just relative to me. But if you were trying to really get some decent grades and you had a teacher that on a class you had to pass, like calculus or something, then I could see where you said, this guy just is not, you know, or this person can't convey anything. Anyhow, you're talking about a good teacher or a bad teacher in this case?
This is a bad teacher. This is a bad teacher. So, all right. So I was in graduate school, okay? And this was accounting 101 for MBAs, which is basically the same as accounting 101 for undergrads and everybody else, I believe. And probably half the students in the class had bachelor's degrees in business, so this was incredibly boring to them. I didn't have a background in accounting, but I found this incredibly boring as well. The teacher was just the worst. When I say the worst, he was like the guy on Forrest Bueller's Day Off. Yeah. He made that guy look like dynamic. Okay. So on the one day at the break, it's a 3-hour class. If you can imagine a 3-hour class, after you've worked 8 or 9 hours and driven an hour
I
through
can't
traffic
even
to get
imagine
to
that. I would have
get
been
to the
sleeping
place.
alone.
So, so one of the guys, we were talking about how boring this guy is, and one of the guys said to me, he said, "What I do before every class," he says, I chug a Coke, so I got sugar, caffeine, lots of liquid, and then I get a bottle of water and take a bottle of water into class. He says, and then I start drinking the water in class. He says, and my bladder pain is so bad that it prevents me from falling asleep. That made a lot of sense to me. So pretty
I
soon
can feel
half the
pain
class
there.
was doing this.
I was trying to
incredible.
imagine that. That's quite an extreme to go to, don't you think? Just to stay awake. But I guess you had to take this class, right?
I had to take it.
So
Yeah,
that was the worst.
yeah. I had some others in engineering school, that undergraduate, that were pretty bad too. But this kind of took the cake. Anyway, that's my bad teacher story.
I wouldn't consider it
Let's
a bad
hear
teacher,
one.
but he was a very experienced elderly teacher, and he was probably my age or that I am now when he was teaching. At least he seemed old. But I was also in with the I was sort of in with the juvenile delinquents.
I do recall that. I think that was a result of that unfortunate incident you had
I
with
was
the
in this
hubcaps.
class,
I don't know.
and this was a I'm pretty sure it must have been some kind of a history class, because I could generally tolerate them without too much effort. But he was droning on and on and on about some subject, and of course we always sat together, right? You know what I mean? We as in the delinquents. You know what I mean?
We
Like
as in
troublemakers.
oh yeah, yeah.
But
You
this
had
time
your
we
corner of the
were
room,
pretty
yeah.
much dead center, right in this little classroom, dead center in what would appear to be theater seats, not like individual desks. So you know what I mean, like movie theaters.
Okay.
Okay. So there's
I
there's
do.
like 5 of us.
Yeah.
So and I have a vivid memory of this, because it's the crew that was there that day. I'm not sure. I think a couple of them aren't even alive today. But so he was raining on about something in history. It had to do with American history or something, perhaps American Revolution or the Civil War or something. So for some reason, I started to hum very quietly the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So then,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you know, just quietly enough. But anyhow, the guy next to me heard it, and then the guy next to us. So there was 6 of us, and we started humming that. And obviously, at that point,
Oh yeah. At
that point, it became loud enough for the class to hear and him to hear. And believe it or not, we got an ovation for that. Well, I'll tell you, that was one of them.
Well deserved.
After that,
sure.
everybody relaxed, of course, and even the teacher, I think, maybe got the gist that we were just bored out of our gourd. So, yeah, so that's my story.
So let's talk about. Do you remember our buddy Gene's
Oh, yeah.
and his car?
Yeah, the classic story.
It was what, a DeSoto or something had Plymouth with wings about 1.5 miles long.
3/8
big fins.
Plymouth. I think it was a 3/8.
And I remember, I think it was it a Hemi engine?
I think what was unique about that car, I remember that car, I think it had push button shifting.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah.
Yes, on the left side. I
on
believe
on
that
the
was
left
the
side.
uniqueness
Right?
about that particular car that we remember.
That we were trying to peg his car, peg meaning go
I tell you
120
what,
miles an hour.
I was not with you on this particular episode, and I think you related that story to me the next day or the day after, whatever, next time we met in school. I was really glad that I wasn't there. I thought you guys were. Tell our listeners what happened.
Okay, well, this was late at night, and there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 of us in the car, and So he's got his new car. It's an old car, and it's all gray primered up.
Four
Looked like a
teenage
beast.
boys.
And so we went out on the interstate. Yeah,
There
four
you go.
teenage boys. Like, what are we going to do tonight? Well, let's see if Gene's car will go 120 miles an hour. So we go out in the interstate. There's virtually no traffic. It was after midnight. I know that. So he brings it to a dead stop, and he punches that one, and he's cranking and cranking, and the engine's screaming, and he punches that number 2 button, and the engine's just screaming away. And we got up to 105, and Gene says, "Damn it, it's not going to peg." And Tom said, "Gene, you're still in second gear." So he had never shifted out of second gear. And as soon as Tom said that, there was a loud explosion, which of course was the engine blowing up. And again, it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning.
So for clarification, like for anybody who might be listening to this who could remember what, a '57 Plymouth? If anybody is old enough to remember it, can go back in time for that one. The participants of that particular episode are all still alive, correct?
That is correct. Somehow
they're still alive. And did we not laugh? In hindsight, did we not laugh hysterically about how that happened? And our poor buddy who kind of lost his car as a result of this thing. We kind of laughed at. In further hindsight, we kind of laughed at the fact that everybody survived that, and we said, "My God, one of those teenage boys."
Yeah, and this was there were no cell phones or anything. Couldn't call home. There were, not even. They was out in the middle of nowhere on the interstate. So we had to walk home. I think it was about 7 miles, and we got home just before daybreak. It was just not a great night.
Did your parents know about that?
But we can still jab Gene about it. Oh yeah, I told him once I got home. Sure, yeah. My dad.
Did he have a little talk with you usually about, son, you could opt out of those situations or something like that?
Well, after I had my first car crash, he took my license away for 6 months. So that was his stoic way of dealing with it.
Well, remind me someday. I find that era of those cars to be fascanaling.
And I think, of course, your dad probably had the nicest car.
The '53 Buick. What was it? It was a '53 Buick 2-door Roadmaster, not a Roadmaster. It was something else.
No, that was the one that you drove, right? He had a was a 1960.
Are you talking about that '60 Buick convertible?
Yeah,
oh, geez.
60 Buick convertible.
Yeah, that was a car and a half. In fact, my recollection of those, I regret that manufacturers eliminated the bench seat. You could drive those cars with your left foot and have your other foot stretched out across to the other door. Remember that? You could do stuff like that. You had a lot of room in there. Now you don't have any room to move your legs all the way around left to right to get that console in the middle. There's got to be a ton of car stories. Anybody could remember that, Dave, that era. That 4-door '53 Pontiac was a wonderful car. It was like a taxi. You could almost walk in, just stand up and walk in that thing.
Yeah, you could have put a 92
Easily,
Buick back seat in there. There would have been room for it. And
that was a '89 Dodge or something, and you were talking about. Let me ask you a question.
That was a long time ago.
I've always wondered, out of all the technology changes on cars, why the automotive industry never eliminated the steering wheel. Okay. Follow-up question?
Follow-up question. Why didn't they eliminate the steering wheel? Maybe they wanted you to be able
I'm going to tell you why.
Show the car where to go?
Once upon a time, we had a farm tractor that had a standard round steering wheel, and somehow the mechanism got broke. And I developed a way to steer the tractor with just a lever. This would be
With
so
vice
simple.
grips?
You
No.
just have your right hand or left hand. You have a lever. A little bit to the right, a little bit forward is to the left, and maybe a little bit to the back is to the right. A bit like an airplane,
Like
but
an
there's no
airplane.
left and right movement, just simply forward and backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And with something that simple, you could actually drive a car with your legs crossed, and you wouldn't have that all that steering wheel in front of you for an impediment when you go crashing
Mm-hmm.
if you bump into something. I mean, it was like
All right.
we have this electric vehicles now, so we've got our drivetrain down to practically nothing. The floors could be flat. There could be so much room in there. And recently I drove a GMC that had the gear shift. Basically, they eliminated that completely, and you just push another push button thing on the dash. So the only thing they haven't done was eliminate the steering wheel, so
Mm-hmm.
you could control it from your right hand on a little console, maybe to the right of the seat or to the left of the seat, depending on which is your favorite hand, or both ways. You can just pull the lever up and maybe push a little bit to the left or right. You can go left or right to steer, or forward and backward. So that's
Mm-hmm.
my contribution to the automotive industry.
Yeah, well, you have me thinking now. Now you look at airplanes,
Yeah.
and they have the joystick, which is in the middle, and you say, well, why don't airplanes have a steering wheel? Well, you think about it, I think the answer is because you've got a pilot and a co-pilot, so they can both work the controls, right? But in a car, you don't want that other person working the controls. You want to do the steering.
Well,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
I mean, you want to do the steering, and I'm thinking about the position of your arms. If you just had how you have to hold your arms up. Sometimes you have to have them on your lap. You're steering with the bottom of the steering wheel. Just for sheer relaxation, you could cross your legs and you could drive. I mean, they have autonomous driving. You could get away with that too. That would still be functional if you want to use that. But as far as the rest of the driving, it would be so easy just to go in and move your hand move your wrist. I believe airplanes have this capability. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of right-hand joystick flying. I would imagine that's because of the controls on an airplane if it's all computer driven. But that's one thing I thought I like the bench seats. I wish they still had those. I enjoyed the era of the cars that we drove as boys. Some of them were real tanks, but it was a fun time. I wouldn't change it for the world. As far as what they do next, who knows? Maybe Tesla or well, it won't be a joystick. It would be some kind of a device on it. Some of them even have little knobs now where they shift. They don't push the lever back and forth; they turn it. And others have buttons. So it would be another option to give you more space, leg room in front of you, and so on and so forth. Or look at your computer screen or something. Or it's just a thought. It's just a thought.
It's a thought. Yeah. You mentioned a couple times sprawling out on the front seat as a driver. I just clicked something in my brain. Oh, well, I mean, we're not going to talk about that.
No sprawling. No sprawling.
But that reminds me of a hitchhiking story, a hitchhiking experience that I had. So when I went to school in one end of the state, lived in the other end of the state, and for a while I was hitchhiking back and forth when I would go home. I didn't have a car at school, couldn't afford a car. So we're hitchhiking. I'm hitchhiking ahead of the exit onto the turnpike, the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And there's another kid who hitchhiking. He walks up to me and he says, well, can we hitchhike together? I said, well, if you want to hitchhike with me, fine. I said, I get the first ride if it's only one. And he said, okay, fine. Some guy pulls up in a big old Cadillac. This is great. This guy's he's well dressed, good looking guy. So we're chatting, and finally, well, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to Pittsburgh to see my lawyer. Oh, that's kind of interesting. And while he's saying this, so we're both in the back seat. Okay, he's got the front seat to himself, and he keeps turning around to look at us while he's talking. Now he has put his left foot on the gas pedal, and,
Oh,
and his right foot
yeah.
is sprawled across the bench seat. That's just what that reminded me about that. I forgot. Yeah. So and he's talking to us, and I'm thinking, look at the road, please, look at the road, drive, drive. But so I said, oh, you're going to see your lawyer? He says, yeah. He says, yeah. He says, I was convicted of counterfeiting. He says, and I'm going to Pittsburgh to see my lawyer to see if we can appeal it. And I said, oh, geez, counterfeiting. And he says, yeah. He says, I really messed up my life. He said, they had these charges against me, and the lawyer said, if we don't hear anything by such and such a time, they just forgot about it. He said, so I didn't hear anything. I go on with my life. I didn't do any more counterfeiting. I met a girl, got married, started a family. He says, now 6 years later, I get a knock on my door. You're going to trial for counterfeiting. And he was convicted. He was out on bail, going to appeal. And when the other kid in the car with me hears this, he starts getting all happy. I'm here with a criminal. This is great. He says, guess what I did? He said, I beat up my dad last night, and I'm getting out of town. Like, oh man, how am I in the car with these two guys? Well, yeah, yeah. Okay. Can I pretend that I live somewhere else so I can get out at the next exit? Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I still wasn't sure if this was true. And he reached under the seat and he pulls out this huge transcript of his trial. It must have been 3 inches thick. He says, "Here it is." And this other kid's he's delirious now. And the kid reaches for his glove compartment. Okay, he reached over and the guy said, "Don't open that." Well, the kid says, "Oh, I just want to." He says, "There's a gun in there." He says, "If you open that, I'm going to take that gun out and shoot you." Oh, jeez. Oh, yeah. So, anyway, that was.
I don't believe you're making this up either.
I am absolutely not making this up.
I mean, this is one of them. Truth is stranger than fiction.
By the time we got to my jump off spot outside of Pittsburgh, I really did feel sorry for the guy. I had no use for the kid. He was really a jerk. And
were you not a little bit concerned? Were you not a little bit worried that you got through that one?
I was concerned for a while, yeah. But the guy was really he was a straight up guy. He clearly felt remorse, felt that he really did something dumb, and so I don't know how it all turned out. I wished him the best, but that's my hitchhiking story.
The funny thing about that would have been, I would have been curious to say, what did you do and how did you do it?
Yeah, jeez.
To see, oh, really? You just put it in a photocopier? Really? Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I figured the less I knew about it, the better. He pulled out the big transcript like, oh, crap, this is real.
Anyhow, those are things we can't do anymore. That ended way back when.
Yeah. Who would hitchhike across the state now?
Only someone your age would probably be able to relate to that. Yeah. So.
Okay. Anyway.
We made it through those. So anyhow, we're learning to Zoom today. We managed to figure that out. I think that's a real accomplishment. And we'll
find out if we learn to Zoom when I play this thing back.
And technically, we would be waiting to see when I'd say, "Hey, the bus is pulling in. I better take off next time." See you here next time. On our little spot along the street and near the world where the world turns.
All right. So we're going to wind this thing down here.
So 2 old books, just reminiscing about the old days and experimenting with the new days. Glad for what time is left.
Zooming around town. Yeah, without a car. All right, buddy. I am going to I'm
Two
going to
old
shut
bucks.
this down. I get all the files from the Zoomers. We'll see if there's anything worth talking about here.